Welcome to the 412, and have I got a story for you? Let's get right to it.
You've landed on planet 412. I'll be your captain of sorts as we navigate this strange, cryptid-filled world. Join me on the quest for truth, through the strange, mysterious, and supernatural. This is Planet 412.
On the evening of November 2nd, 2021, at 6:45 p.m., a man named David Cole sat alone in his cramped office. He was staring at a half-eaten sandwich on his desk. He was tired from working on a freelance project all week. He still had overdue bills on his mind. He glanced at an old computer screen that kept flickering. He was waiting for a file to finish downloading. He had read about something called Project Bluebeam on an obscure forum. He was curious because people online were talking about government plots and secret technologies. He wanted to see if there was anything behind those rumors. He had no idea what he was going to get into. He clicked on a file that someone had shared with him. It was a scanned document full of notes and scribbles. He noticed the name Sergei Monast repeated in several places. He leaned in closer, trying to make sense of the messy text. He saw references to NASA, mind control, and a plan to fake an alien invasion. He felt an uneasy feeling. He was wondering if any of this could be true or if it was just another internet rumor. He decided to dig in deeper. He opened his web browser and typed in Sergei Monast's name. He found the other websites that mentioned a conspiracy called Project Bluebeam. He scrolled through pages of wild claims. Some said NASA was preparing to create holographic images in the sky. Some mentioned a plan to destroy religion and replace it with a new worldwide faith. Others insisted these documents were leaked proof of a massive deception. He kept reading. He saw references to sudden deaths and missing files. He told himself that it felt too bizarre to be real. They said Sergei Monas was a journalist from Quebec. They said he wrote about top secret plans called Project Bluebeam. They also said he died under strange circumstances. David remembered a friend once telling him that conspiracy theories often grow when someone dies in a sudden way. David was thinking that maybe that could have happened here. He checked the time. It was past 8 p.m. He still had some freelance work to finish, but he still couldn't stop scrolling. He wanted to know more about how this all started. He found an old PDF of Monast's alleged document. It mentioned a four-step plan. It talked about fake earthquakes, staged religious sightings, mind control, and a final night of chaos. David skimmed through these paragraphs. They sounded like something out of a science fiction script. Yet, people were treating it like it was real. He wrote down a few notes for himself. He planned to look for any references that could be verified. He told himself that he shouldn't jump to any conclusions. He started seeing references to NASA's involvement. He saw claims that NASA would produce massive holograms in the sky. There was talk about advanced technology that could beam voices into people's heads. He wondered if that technology existed. He had heard about rumors that the military working on strange new devices was true, but he never saw that proof. He paused, took another bite of his cold sandwich, and kept reading. He noticed the date in the document 1994. Man, I was just there for a second. I'm sorry. I was playing college football. Man, I'm not going to get started. It just time flies so fast, doesn't it? I mean, the blink of an eye. I just, it's incredible. All right, I'm sorry. It said that when Monas first presented his findings, it also mentioned that some people believe that the plan would be carried out by 1996. That obviously didn't happen. Nothing major has happened since 1996, at least not on this scale. So David was thinking there were these predictions, and obviously they were off. So he also noticed, other than these later predictions that had pointed to the year 2000, that year obviously came and went without a grand holographic show in the sky. This made him wonder, though, why people still followed this theory. He checked the discussion board and saw that some users said the plan was postponed. They argued that the conspirators were waiting for the right global crisis. David started to see how this theory adapted. He realized he might learn more if he spoke to someone who believed in it. He posted in a conspiracy forum asking if anyone had actual evidence. He used a burner account because he didn't want his real name associated with it. Pretty smart. He waited for a response. The forum was active and people were always sharing new videos, even though many looked blurry or faked. Pretty normal for these type of forums. I mean, you guys know, Bigfoot and other cryptids. No one ever really has that crystal clear picture. Hopefully that changes in 2025. He also noticed a lot of them using the term Bluebeam test run. Whenever someone filmed strange lights in the sky, that's the term they used. He got a direct message from a user named Orion Drive. That user said he had read all of Monast's work. He offered to show David some important documents. David felt a mix of excitement and skepticism. He set up a time to meet. It was already late, but he wanted to get some rest before heading out in the morning. So he shut down his computer, stacked his notes on the side of his desk, and went to wash the dishes in the sink. While scrubbing an old coffee mug, he was thinking about how strange it felt to chase a rumor like this. He wasn't sure if it was wasting his time, but he wanted to see if there was any truth behind the bizarre claims. On November 3rd, 2021, at 9:15 a.m., David walked into a small diner on the east side of town. The place smelled like old grease and burnt toast. He ordered a cup of coffee. He looked around the room until he noticed a man in a dark hoodie sitting in the back booth. The man waved him over. David slid into the seat and tried to stay calm. The man introduced himself as the one who messaged David on the forum. He spoke in a low voice, explaining that he was convinced NASA and the other agencies were part of the plot called Project Bluebeam. He said it had been planned for decades, and he told David that Sergei Monas discovered the outline, and that's why he was targeted. David asked if this man had seen any official documents. The man said that he had only seen references. He told David that the real files were locked away. David was thinking that it sounded very vague, and the man pulled out a file folder. This surprised David. He flipped it open and showed David printouts from different websites. The feeling of this is more than just a joke started to dawn on David, and he explained that NASA had the capability to create large-scale holograms. He pointed to some images of advanced projection tech. He mentioned as well that the military could place voices in people's heads using certain frequencies. Man, we have discussed frequencies, vibrational frequencies. He said it was sometimes called the voice of God weapon. David was reminded of rumors he had heard about the microwave auditory effects. He nodded, but he was still not very sure. The man said that the end goal was to stage a massive event, something that would shock everyone around the world. He said that religious figures might appear in the sky, speaking in multiple languages. He said it would be so convincing that most people would believe that this was real. There would be no doubt to 95% of people around the globe. David asked why this would be done. Why would they do this? The man explained that it was about total and utter control. He said that if people would see what looks like a divine sign, that they might accept a new global authority. David listened closely. He felt unsettled. He also remembered he needed to pay his car insurance soon, and that was stressing him out. But he tried to stay focused on this conversation. The man kept going. He said that the plan also involved creating a fake alien threat. This is what I've honestly been thinking about here, guys. That is number one for me, everybody. The fake alien threat. That is what I have been waiting to talk to you guys about. This is it. That is number one for me. That is exactly what I've been hearing about over the years about Project Bluebeam. This other stuff about, God and religious figures is newer for me. He believed once the people were terrified enough, they would do whatever they were told. David could see the man was dead serious. He was tapping his fingers on the table, looking around like he expected someone to be watching them. He was sweating down his temples. David wondered if this guy had been reading too many fringe blogs, but he decided to keep an open mind. The man mentioned that Sergei Monas died right after publishing this information. He believed Monas was killed because he got too close to the truth. David asked if the cause of death was known. The man told him that it was reported as a heart attack, but he insisted it was suspicious. He added that a close associate of Monas also died around the same time and of the same type of death. I need to add something here as well. A number of different events where people have sent messages to family members because they were divulging government secrets and such. They died in the exact same manners of strange heart ailments when they had never had high blood pressure or high cholesterol, no heart issues, were in good shape. Um, you know, you take it what you will. It's just very strange that, these type of events occur with people that are giving up big secrets of government, and they all are passing away in the same form and fashion. David made a note to look up those details later. The man then slid the folder across the table. He told David to read more about the 4 steps. Then he stood up and said he had to leave. David thanked him and watched as he disappeared through the diner's front door. David felt a slight heaviness in the pit of his stomach. He wasn't sure if it was from the strong coffee or the conversation. Later that afternoon at 2:30 p.m., David sat in his car in a parking lot behind a bank. He flipped through the pages in the folder. He read about the alleged steps of Project Bluebeam in detail. First, there would be an engineered natural disaster and archaeological discovery. The plan was to shake religious foundations by revealing new evidence that would challenge doctrines. People would lose faith if they thought the core beliefs were disproven. David read this and thought about how big a shock that would be to people. He tried to picture how people would react if they saw ancient texts that reinterpreted all that they believed. He wrote a quick note reminding himself to see if there were any actual documented attempts at this. Second, there would be a huge display in the sky, holograms of religious figures that would appear over different parts of the world. Each religion would see their own face deity. Then those figures would merge into one universal entity. David paused. He was imagining what that would look like on a global scale. He recalled times when he saw elaborate holograms at concerts, but those were indoors. Could it really be done in the open sky? He reminded himself that technology might exist that he had never heard of. Think about it, guys. They had something crash at Roswell. It wasn't a weather balloon. We all know it's not what they told us back then. The first newspaper article was the real one. They had a UFO that crashed and we got it. The second day, they tried to pull a fake weather balloon article that nobody believes. And it's so silly that to this day, they still try to lie to us. We all know that they've been reverse engineering things for decades. So imagine by now, and they've been telling us too, people that have retired from the military, people like Paul Hellyer, who was the Minister of Defense from Canada for years, said that we have been working with beings from other planets and other solar systems and dimensions. They exist. We have been reverse engineering things. We've been told that the technology, the minimum of what the government has, is a minimum of 100 years ahead of what the general public knows of. The minimum. So imagine, can they do what they're talking about here? Yeah, they can do a lot more. So, you know, them talking about putting this into our heads is super easy and immensely scary. Third, there would be no, let's get back to it. Thirdly, there would be telepathic communication. The plan said voices would beam into people's heads, telling them that their new savior was speaking to them. David found that part especially unnerving, just like I said, me too. He had heard and read that some frequencies can make people hear sounds without their ears. He rubbed his forehead. He wondered if it was possible to target entire populations. He was thinking it sounded too ambitious, but it still rattled him. Fourth, there would be a fake alien invasion. This is the one I've heard of too. It would be mixed with a staged rapture. People would see UFOs attacking cities. Others would see a sudden evacuation, as if the faithful were being taken. The chaos would drive the entire world into a panic. In that moment, a new world authority would step in and promise safety. David thought about how fear would often make people cling to those who claim to offer protection. He saw how that could be a potential strategy if somebody wanted to consolidate power. That would be a simple way for them to do it. He set the pages down. He looked at the back door of the bank. He remembered he was supposed to deposit a check today. He felt torn between his normal life and the strange world of Project Bluebeam. He decided to go inside, handle his bank errand, and then find a quiet place to keep reading. He walked through the parking lot. He was trying to sort out his thoughts. He was telling himself that the steps sounded like a blueprint for a science fiction movie. But he also remembered that sometimes real life plans can sound impossible until they happen. He was just hoping to find some actual proof, not just a rumor. At 4 p.m., David was back at home, sitting at his worn out kitchen table. He pulled out his laptop and opened the search engine. He wanted to learn more about Sergei Monast himself. He found a few references stating that Sergei Monast was a Canadian journalist who wrote about secret societies and conspiracies. He gave public talks in Quebec about NASA, the United Nations, and something called the New World Order. Some people called him a crackpot, others called him a truth teller. I find that funny that a lot of people called him a crackpot because when you have those people that are trying to shush those that are getting the truth out there, all of a sudden you're a crackpot, you're crazy, you're insane. David saw repeated mentions that Monas believed the entire world's population could be deceived by advanced technology. He also saw rumors that Molast was arrested and or harassed. David couldn't confirm these claims from a single official source. He only found repeated secondhand reports. He also saw that Manas died in December 1996. People said it was a heart attack, but conspiracy forums claimed it was murder. Funny, it was a heart attack, right? They said his children were taken by authorities not long before his death. David found that detail strange. He wasn't sure if it was accurate, but he noted it. He also saw that many wrote about how Monast's friend died the exact same way shortly after. If it was the pattern of the stories where whistleblowers meet their untimely ends, this one fit right into the puzzle. David realized these events made Monast a martyr figure in the conspiracy world. He recalled the folder's mention of a big role in NASA. He typed NASA denies Project Bluebeam into the search bar. He found a few articles by skeptics. They pointed out that NASA's main focus was space exploration, not religious manipulation. You know, one of the things that I love saying about NASA, it stands for never a straight answer. I mean, it is basically the truth. They always deny all these things out there. You take it with a grain of salt. You believe everything they say, or you can question everything out there. It's your right to do it. They said that there was zero evidence of a plan to fake any second coming. David noticed some posts that tried to link NASA's satellites to advanced projection systems. He couldn't find anything that looked solid. He also thought about the fact that NASA's budgets are public record, and building a massive hologram network would likely show up somewhere. Right. He didn't see any mention of it in the official documents. He was thinking that supporters of Project Bluebeam might say that budgets were hidden in black projects. That was always the fallback explanation for classified spending. He closed his laptop and rubbed his eyes. He felt a bit overwhelmed. He could see that believers had an answer for everything. He also saw that skeptics had reasons to doubt. He decided to keep an open mind and gather more information. He stood up to refill his glass of water. He looked around his small kitchen. He thought about how normal life felt right now. He wondered if the world was as stable as it seemed, or if something big could happen at any moment. Later that night, at 8:20 p.m., David got a call from an old friend named Marina. She worked as a part-time researcher at a local university. David told her what he was investigating, and she told him she had time to help him look into it. She suggested to meet him in person the next day so that she could share some archives she had access to. David felt relieved. He wanted a more objective voice. Marina had a background in history. She might be able to spot if these claims lined up with any real events. David was also glad to see an old friend. They hadn't talked much since she moved across town. He spent the rest of the evening going through more forum posts. People were discussing possible test runs. He saw mention of a weird spiral light in the sky over Norway in 2009. I remember that. One user claimed it was a failed rocket test. Not so sure about that. But another insisted it was a holographic glitch. He saw someone else link it to Project Bluebeam. I don't know if it was Project Bluebeam. It very well could have been. Um, I am questioning if maybe they were trying to open a portal. I don't know. David realized that many unexplained sky phenomena were pinned on Bluebeam. He thought about how each event seemed to feed the theory. If anything odd showed up in the sky, it had to be part of the plan. He noticed that many of these claims had no direct evidence. Still, they carried a tone of certainty. He also read about something called the microwave auditory effect. People were saying you could beam sounds into a person's head. He saw speculation that satellites could scale it up. He wasn't sure if it was possible. He did recall reading an article about military research. He got up to grab a book from his shelf. It was an older book about Cold War mind control experiments. He skimmed a chapter on radio frequency weapons. He saw mention of directed energy that could cause someone to hear clicks or buzzing. But mass usage on an entire country seemed far-fetched. He was having trouble picturing a scenario where everyone on Earth hears the same voice. Still, the idea gave him chills. At around midnight, David finally turned off his computer. He took out the trash. He checked his mailbox. He found a notice about rent. He sighed and realized he needed to make sure he kept track of his real life responsibilities. Always a bummer. He couldn't spend all the time chasing conspiracies, but he also felt like he was close to understanding why this theory refused to die. He placed the notice on his kitchen counter, brushed his teeth, and then went to bed. On November 4th, 2021, at 10:05 a.m., David met Marina in a quiet study room at the university library. The library was an older building with stone walls and a musty smell. They sat down at a small table with a pile of reference materials. Marina told him that she found some older magazine articles mentioning Sergei Monast. She told him also that most mainstream outlets dismissed his ideas. She also said that some religious communities took his warnings more seriously. She showed him how a note about some certain groups believed the Antichrist would appear in the sky. They connected that to what Monash said about holographic gods merging. Marina explained that she tried to track down any mention of Project Bluebeam in official archives. She found nothing. She told David that if NASA or the United Nations were involved in something so huge, there would likely be at least one leak or whistleblower over the decades. She pointed out that big conspiracies are hard to keep secret. David nodded. He was still curious, though, why so many believed in it. And Maria showed him a piece about doomsday predictions. She said that some folks link Project Bluebeam to the book of Revelation. They think it's a part of the end time scenario. She said that might be why it resonates with people. It taps into bigger fears about the apocalypse. David listened. He realized how this theory combines space technology, religion, government power, and mind control fears. He saw how that could hook people who feel the world is unstable. He asked if she read anything about Monast's death. She said she saw scattered references, mostly repeating the same story. He died of a heart attack in 1996. She said there wasn't much else. She pointed out that people often assume foul play when a conspiracy theorist dies. She said she wasn't sure if there was more to it. David wrote down a note to see if there was an official death certificate available somewhere. He wasn't sure if that would help. They then discussed the possibility that Monast's entire theory might have borrowed from science fiction. Marina recalled about a Star Trek storyline where an alien pretends to be God. She suggested that maybe Monast found inspiration in a popular culture. She thought it was interesting that so many of his points matched certain sci fi plots from older shows or movies. David nodded. He was starting to suspect that the lines between fiction and conspiracy can blur if somebody is looking for hidden agendas. He thanked Marina for her time. She packed up her references. He walked her out of the library thinking about how so much of this might just be a rehash of fictional ideas. Around 1 p.m., David grabbed lunch at a nearby sandwich shop. The place was bustling. He squeezed into a small table in the corner. He laid out his notes while he chewed on a turkey sub. A young couple next to him was arguing about the weekend plans they had made. He tried to tune them out. He reviewed the main points about what he had gathered. One, Sergei Monas claimed NASA was behind a plan called Project Bluebeam. Two, the plan involved 4 steps: fake earthquakes, a giant sky show, mind control, and a final staged invention or rapture. 3, Monas said the end goal was a one world government with a new religion. 4, Monas died in 1996, fueling speculation that he was silenced. 5, there was little to no evidence of official involvement. 6, believers point to new technologies and unexplained sightings as proof. There is little to no hard evidence of official involvement. Believers point to new technologies and unexplained sightings as proof. David tapped his pen on the table. He wondered how many people seriously believed in this. He also wondered if some encountered real advanced technology that made them suspicious. He got up to refill his drink. He thought about the pace of technological process. He reminded himself that the government invests in many secret projects. He wondered if people use that too to justify theories like this. He finished his lunch and decided to visit a local conspiracy meetup that evening. He found a flyer online about a small group that gathers about once a month. They discuss UFOs, secret societies, and hidden agendas. The flyer said they would be meeting in a community hall on the outskirts of town. David jotted down the address. He got up to leave. He noticed the young couple next to him was still talking about trivial things. He realized how normal everyday life can feel while these big conspiracy ideas swirl around online. He headed out thinking that tonight might give him a direct look at how people talk about Project Bluebeam in a group setting. That same day at 7:15 p.m., David arrived at the small community hall. The parking lot was half empty, and he saw a few older cars near the entrance. He walked inside, paid a small fee at a folding table, and took a seat in the back row. The room had about 20 chairs set up in the front of a small stage. A tall man in a flannel shirt stood up in front, flipping through slides on a projector. David noticed one slide had a screenshot of bright lights in the sky. The man began explaining that these lights were spotted in several locations last summer. He claimed they were tests connected to Bluebeam. He said that official sources tried to pass them off as drones or weather balloons. I'm sorry. I'm so tired of the weather balloon thing. And I guess that the drone theory, that's our generation, the new generation's weather balloons. So get ready for that just being the excuse all the time. He added that the media never told the full story. Well, we already know that. David noted that the audience seemed engaged. People were nodding. The man moved to the next slide, which showed an image of a statue weeping tears. He said that maybe this was an early use of holographic illusions to stir religious fervor. David thought it seemed like a stretch. He also saw that no one in the room questioned it. The man mentioned Sergei Monast by name. He summarized how Monast warned about NASA and the UN planning a giant deception. The audience seemed familiar with the theory. Some were whispering that they had been tracking these developments for years. Others were writing down notes. One person near David mumbled that they had seen a documentary linking Bluebeam to the Freemasons. Another one said they read that certain governments were practicing with large LED sky projections. David stayed quiet. He was trying to absorb the atmosphere. After the presentation, a few people gathered near the table with snacks. David approached them and introduced himself. He asked if they had any solid proof. One older woman told him that she saw actual documents posted online many years ago, but they vanished. A young man chimed in saying that a friend of his once worked near a base that tested new projection systems. He said that friend wouldn't talk about it in public. Another woman nodded and said that the real evidence was kept from the public for obvious reasons. David realized that they all believed the cover up was absolute. He asked if anyone had looked into the possibility that this was based on science fiction or rumor. A few of them shook their heads. They insisted that it was too detailed to be fake. They said that it explained why certain UFO sightings popped up in patterns and why certain religious miracles got media coverage. David saw that they had woven every odd event into grand narrative. He felt that same uneasy sense he had before. He understood that for them, Project Bluebeam was the key to everything. Later that night at 10:45 p.m., David drove home through empty streets. He felt a bit drained from the discussions. He tried to remain objective, but he found it challenging. He replayed the conversation in his mind. He wondered if there was a middle ground. Maybe there was some technology that could project images, but not all the scale that they claimed. Maybe governments considered psychological operations, but not to the extent of faking an alien invasion. He thought about known historical cases. He recalled hearing that militaries had used deceptive tactics before, like playing ghost sounds or using inflatable tanks.
Vietnam War, U.S. forces employed psychological warfare in Operation Wandering Soul, playing eerie recordings to exploit Vietnamese superstitions. On February 10, 1970, North Vietnamese troops in Thanh Nha province heard ghostly moans and Vietnamese voices mimicking dead comrades. These sounds, blasted via loudspeakers, aimed to instill fear and confusion, leveraging the belief in wandering spirits. Known as Ghost Tape Number 10, these recordings caused some enemy soldiers to surrender. Although effective initially, the tactic was phased out by the early 1970s as the enemy adapted.
But projecting massive holograms of religious figures in broad daylight seemed beyond anything documented. He parked in front of his building and walked up the narrow staircases to his apartment. He dropped his keys on the kitchen table. He was thinking about that final point the group made, that the plan might be gradual. They believed that the conspirators were laying groundwork through media and staged events. They said that once everything was in place, the grand show would begin. David brushed his teeth, changed into more comfortable clothes, and tried to unwind reading a novel that had nothing to do with conspiracies. After a few pages, though, he realized his mind kept drifting back to Bluebeam. He finally turned out the light to try to sleep. Early the next morning, November 5th, 2021, around 6:30 a.m., David woke up feeling restless. He decided to compile everything he had learned so far. He made a list of the claims versus the facts. Claim: NASA can project massive 3D holograms worldwide. Fact: large holograms exist, but they usually need specific conditions to be visible. Outdoor air is not a solid medium. Drone light shows are possible, but they create shapes with synchronized lights, not giant complex deities. Claim: a device can beam voices into people's heads on a global scale. Fact: the microwave auditory effect can make a person perceive sounds, but it's not known to be effective on large populations. Claim: earthquakes can be triggered in specific locations to reveal new artifacts. Fact: some technology might induce minor seismic effects, but large scale targeted earthquakes seem unproven. Claim: Monast died mysteriously. Fact: he died of a reported heart attack at age 51. Some find it suspicious, others accept it as unfortunate timing. David read over his notes. He saw that each claim stretched the known limits of science. He also saw that the entire plan seemed reliant on perfect execution worldwide. He felt that was still unlikely. And still, he remembered how conspiracies do not rely on likelihood, they rely on suspicion. He set down his pen, he glanced at a stack of unpaid bills, and realized he needed to focus on his finances soon. He felt that he had spent most of his free time chasing this story, but a part of him wanted to learn just a bit more. He remembered the reference to a possible Star Trek connection. He decided to check if that was just a rumor. He found an article that explained Gene Roddenberry once had a story idea about an alien that pretends to be a god. The article said the script involved illusions and false religious figures. David noticed it aligned in some ways with what Project Bluebeam described. He was thinking that maybe Sergei Monast read about the fictional plots and reworked them into a conspiracy. Or maybe he believed the fiction was a hint at real plans. I'm going to say something here, real quick. Those of you that have frequented my channel or seen live streams I've been on, you guys know that one of the things that has been spoken about in mass media and Hollywood is that they say that there are truths in Hollywood movies that people think it's all fiction, science fiction, it's fake, it's just, mythology and just to, make us enjoy a movie, when in truth there is supposedly some truth to those things, and they're trying to make us get ready for things in the future that are supposedly going to happen, or that aliens are real. And these movies like Independence Day or other movies that we watch, there are truths to those. Or movies with creatures, cryptids or whatever, there are truths to those. Can I prove it? No, I'm just listening to what some of these, myths are being said out there. It makes you think, though, when you're listening to what I'm saying about Gene Roddenberry and this Star Trek episode, that Bluebeam, maybe somebody in Bluebeam saw that Gene Roddenberry episode and said, you know what, we're going to utilize this. And that's going to be one of the things that we do. There's some things that NASA is doing that they pulled from watching as a kid from science fiction. There's nothing silly or stupid about them. People doing in science fiction, pulling from that and making things real now from things that they saw when they were younger. I think that's really cool and incredible, pulling from those movies and making things realistic and making things happen from, science fiction movies. So going back to what we were talking about before, David felt a small sense of clarity. He realized that people could find parallels anywhere if they looked hard enough, as I was saying. At 9 a.m., David got a phone call from Marina. She told him she found a local historian who remembered meeting with Sergei Monast once at a conference. She suggested they go talk to him. David agreed. He felt that hearing from someone who actually saw Monast in person might provide insight. They arranged to meet at a public library downtown. That afternoon, they sat in a quiet reading room with a middle-aged man who said they had crossed paths with Monast back in the middle 90s. He told them that Monast seemed convinced that global elites were planning a new world order. He said Monast was intense but polite. He recalled that Monast mentioned Project Bluebeam as something he believed would happen soon. David asked if Monast provided any concrete evidence. The man shook his head. He said Monast referred to inside sources, but never named them. He also said that some people in the audience were intrigued, while others looked skeptical. He didn't recall Monast using the term holograms, But he remembered talk about illusions in the sky. He added that Monas had a habit of connecting many events to a single grand plot. He said Monas was worried about mind control technology like electromagnetic signals that could alter thoughts. He believed that was going to be used alongside the illusions. The man told David that this talk happened around 1994 or 1995. He said that a year later, he heard Monast had passed away. He assumed it was natural causes, but he also remembered hearing the conspiracy rumors soon after. David thanked him for his time. The man wished them good luck. He said Monast was passionate and truly believed what he was saying. After the meeting, Marina and David walked outside. They stood near the library steps. The air was chilly and the sky looked overcast. Marina said she felt that Monast was sincere in his beliefs, but sincerity definitely doesn't always equal truth. David agreed. He recalled how many conspiracy theorists are genuine in their convictions. They parted ways. David told her he might try to wrap up his research soon because he had to return to his regular work. She gave him a small smile and said she understood. She reminded him that the human imagination can be powerful when it blends fear and faith. That evening, November 5th, 2021, at 8:10 p.m., David sat in his living room. The TV was on in the background, but he had the volume low. He spread out his notes on the coffee table. He wanted to organize everything into a final summary for himself. He labeled different sections: origins, technology claims, public reaction, possible inspirations, and reasons for persistence. He was planning to record a short voice memo for a friend who worked at a podcast company. She had asked if he might contribute to an episode on conspiracy theories. He pressed the record button on his phone's memo app. He spoke in a calm tone, summarizing the main points. He explained that Project Bluebeam is a theory attributed to Sergei Monast. He said it involves a plot to fake the second coming of religious figures in an alien invasion to create a new world order. He mentioned that believers point to advanced holograms and mind control devices as the main tools. He noted also that Monast's death in 1996 added mystery. He said that no verifiable documents proved NASA's involvement, and skeptics see strong parallels to science fiction stories. He stated that it remains popular online because it combines religious, technological, and political fears in one grand narrative. When he finished recording, he felt a small sense of closure. He had walked through every angle he could find. He thought about how this theory endures despite multiple failed predictions. He considered how it might continue to evolve in the future. He imagined that any large-scale UFO event or religious miracle story would likely reignite the conversation again. He turned off the TV, noticing he hadn't really paid attention to whatever show was on. He went to the kitchen to start preparing some pasta. While the water boiled, he thought about the delicate line between curiosity and obsession. He felt a slight relief that he had gathered enough information to satisfy himself, but he knew there would always be more to uncover if he kept looking. The internet never runs out of new theories or claims. He ate his pasta in silence. He scrolled through his phone, seeing fresh notifications from conspiracy forums. People were talking about odd lights over a distant city. Some said it was more proof of Bluebeam. Others insisted it was just a weather phenomenon. David decided not to dive in. He closed the forum. He took a deep breath. He decided he needed a break. On November 6th, 2021, at 7:45 a.m., David woke up and checked his voicemail. There was a new message from a blocked number. It was a man's voice, sounding a bit frantic. He recognized it as the person he had met at the diner. The man said he had found another link that tied NASA's new satellite project to the holographic projection. He said he wanted David to call him back. He insisted it was urgent. David stood there, phone in hand. He stared at the hallway mirror. He felt a creeping pressure, like he was being pulled in again. He thought about calling him back right away, and he felt this hesitation. He had personal errands he had to take care of. He needed to get groceries. He needed to pay bills. He had to go to the electric company. He had to meet his cousin for coffee. He decided to wait. He told himself that there were theories that could wait. He had to handle normal life tasks. He quickly got dressed and stepped outside. The morning air was crisp. He walked to the corner store to pick up bread and milk. He smiled at a neighbor who was out walking a dog. For a moment, everything felt calm. Yet, on his way to the electric company, he couldn't help but think about the message. He wondered if the man had found something new. He also reminded himself that so far, all he had seen were references to references, nothing concrete. He paid his bill. Then he headed to the coffee shop to meet his cousin. She was chatting about family news and holiday plans. David tried to be present in the conversation. He tried not to think about NASA or illusions in the sky. He sipped his latte and told her about some small job prospects he had. She gave him a warm smile, telling him that sounded great. He felt a sense of normalcy, like his life outside conspiracies was still there waiting for him. At 2 p.m., David returned to his apartment. He stared at his phone. He played the voicemail again. The man sounded eager. David decided to return the call. The phone rang a few times. The man answered in a hushed tone. He said he had found a set of patents that described advanced projection methods. He said it matched what Sergei Monast wrote about. David asked for links or specific patent numbers. The man actually gave him some numbers and said they were public but not well known. David jotted them down. The man told him that these patents prove everything. David said he would check them out. The man warned him that if David dug too deep, he might draw unwanted attention. David thanked him and hung up. He typed the patent numbers into an online database. He found some documents related to the projecting images onto clouds or similar mediums. He saw references to different inventors. He read the abstracts. It seemed like technology for advertising or entertainment. He saw no mention of a plan to fool the world, but getting off of what I'm telling you guys, why would you? Really? I mean, come on. He read deeper. Some patents talked about creating illusions in the air, but they mentioned it as a novelty or for amusement parks. He understood how a determined mind could link this Project Bluebeam. He understood how a determined mind could link this to Project Bluebeam. Yet he saw nothing about a worldwide scheme. Again, why would you? He realized that Advanced technology often has multiple uses, though. He wasn't convinced these patents confirmed anything about NASA or a hidden plot. He decided to let the man know. He sent a quick message explaining that the patents didn't necessarily prove a global conspiracy. The man replied that David needed to connect the dots. David was thinking that sometimes people see what they want to see. He didn't blame the man for wanting answers, but he felt they were going in circles. That evening, November 6th, 2021, at 8:50 p.m., David sat down to draft a final personal report for himself. He planned to store it away and maybe revisit it someday. He wrote in a clear, concise way. He stated that Project Bluebeam is a modern conspiracy theory claiming that elites will stage a false end times event using holograms and mind control. He noted that it all stems from Sergei Monast's writings in the 1990s. He observed that Monast offered no verifiable proof beyond his own assertions. He added that believers see every new technology or sky anomaly as part of the plan. He then explained that skeptics point out the lack of real evidence, the repeated missed deadlines, and the theory's heavy resemblance to science fiction plots. He ended by saying that, in his view, it was very unlikely that NASA or any agency was preparing such an event. He admitted that governments have tested strange technologies, but nothing close to the scale described. He also recognized that people often fear technology they don't understand, and that fear can lead to grand narratives. David looked at the time. He realized he had spent several days on this, poring over articles, meeting people, and reading old documents. He felt that he had reached a stopping point. He saved his file. He shut down his laptop. He glanced at his phone, half expecting another message from the diner man or from the forum. Nothing came. He felt a small wave of relief. He got up, stretched, and decided to call it a night. He brewed some tea. He thought about how easy it can be to fall into a rabbit hole of theories. He realized that if someone wants to believe in Project Bluebeam, they will always find a new angle or story to support it. If someone wants to debunk it, they will always find enough gaps and missing evidence to dismiss it. He felt that it revealed more about human nature than about NASA or secret governments. He turned off his kitchen light and headed to bed. On November 7th, 2021, around 9 a.m., David woke up feeling lighter. He decided to head to a local park for some fresh air. He walked past families pushing strollers, teenagers on skateboards, and seniors chatting on benches, people walking their dogs. The sky was overcast, and he noticed a few birds circling above. He found a quiet spot under a tree and sat on a bench, just letting his mind wander. He recalled the main points about Project Bluebeam. He realized that the sky is such a large canvas, and if someone staged something incredible there, it would capture people's attention. He also realized how a large part of this theory depended on fear and trust issues. People who feel powerless often gravitate to conspiracies that explain big events. Maybe that was the heart of the story. He got up and strolled by a small pond. He saw a family feeding ducks. He noticed a child laughing as the ducks scrambled for pieces of bread. He thought about how normal life can seem, yet theories like Bluebeam claim huge forces are working behind the scenes. He was thinking that maybe these claims were a way to make sense of a complicated world. He paused to watch the ducks. He decided that for now, he wouldn't pursue the conspiracy any further. He was tired and he had other things to focus on. That afternoon, November 7th, 2021, at 2:15 p.m., David got a text from Marina. She asked if he was satisfied with his research. He texted back that he was. He said he still has questions, but not enough concrete answers to keep going. She replied that she understood, and she had said it might be one of those conspiracies that never dies because it taps into too many fears. He agreed. He told her thanks for all the help. He spent the rest of the day tidying up his apartment. He washed dishes, vacuumed the living room, and took the recycling out. While folding laundry, he thought about how easily he got sucked into this story. He reminded himself that sometimes it's worth investigating things that sound impossible just to see if there's any truth to it. He decided that in this case, the truth seemed to be that Project Bluebeam was more rumor than reality. In the late evening of November 7th, 2021, at 10:30 p.m., David sat on his couch with a notebook on his lap. He wrote the final reflection. He wrote that Project Bluebeam, at its core, suggests a staged second coming and alien invasion using advanced technology. He noted that it was first proposed in the 1990s by Sergei Monast. He said the theory persisted because it addresses deep human fears, the fear of losing control, the fear of being deceived by powerful forces, and the fear that our faith and beliefs can be manipulated. He wrote that it also ties into real historical events like government experiments or illusions used in warfare, which makes it feel possible to some. But he underlined that no official evidence confirms any of the claims, and the technology required might exceed what we know is feasible. He closed his notebook. He reflected that maybe Monast fully believed in his warnings, or maybe he built on existing fiction. Either way, the idea continues to spread online. People connect every strange sky event to it, just like people connect other conspiracies to random occurrences. David reminded himself that it's not just his job to change anyone's mind. He just wanted to understand how the theory worked. He turned off the lamp. The small apartment grew dim. He sat there for a moment, thinking about everything. He realized he still had to figure out his next freelance project. He also tried to remember that he planned to call his mom the next day to check in. Life went on. Even with conspiracies in the background, daily concerns didn't disappear. He got up, he stretched, and headed to bed with a sense of acceptance. On the morning of November 8th, 2021, at 7 a.m., the sun peeked through David's window. He made coffee and ate a quick bowl of cereal. He turned on his computer to catch up on some real work. His email inbox was filled with client messages and updates. He sighed, realizing he had a busy day ahead. He felt a small sense of gratitude that he could return to a routine. He also felt a quiet confidence that he had learned enough about Project Bluebeam to form his own conclusion. He opened one last tab on his browser to see if anything new had popped up overnight about the conspiracy. There was a thread discussing a rumored NASA event. People were saying it might be the start of Bluebeam. David scanned it. He saw nothing concrete. He decided it was time to log off. He had deadlines to meet, errands to run, and a life outside of these theories. He closed the browser. He took a sip of coffee. He told himself that if a holographic messiah ever appeared in the sky, at least he would have some context. Until then, he planned to focus on things he actually could control. Outside, a car horn honked. He grabbed his jacket and stepped out into the hallway. He locked the door behind him, feeling like he was leaving the swirling world of conspiracies behind, at least for now. Gave you a few different looks on Project Bluebeam, huh, guys? What do you think about that story? I mean, there's a lot of different views out there about what it is, what's going to happen if it ever really does, and if there already is different things going on. If you watch different YouTube channels, like one of my favorite, the Impossible channel, and if someone gets him a message, I'd love to have him on the show someday. There's definitely some stuff going on. Personally, I believe that they're practicing and testing technology like Project Bluebeam out there. You also have the auditory noises going on around the world. They call them different types of things. They sound like maybe massive boring machines underground digging things. Some people say sound like horns from heaven. You guys know what I'm talking about. It's not out of the realm of possibilities, especially with the technology that we all know the governments have, and the technology that we know we're not even privy to. Thank you for landing on Planet 412. We'll see you next time, everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe, as it greatly helps out the channel. I'll see you next time on Planet 412.
Hey, Planet 412. 2025 is going to be gigantic for the 412. All kinds of new formats and huge things are in store. What am I talking about? You'll find out. But one thing's going to happen for sure. This guy's going to be in a new documentary on ETS, Exposing the Strange, directed by David Wolf. Well, David Wolf was just on a live stream not too long ago on Planet 412. You guys probably saw it. If you haven't, check it out. And you can see that ad right now on Planet 412's newest episode. Check it out.
What do you think Dogman is? Do you think it's supernatural or flesh and blood?
That's a slippery slope for some people. So with my experience, I 100% believe that it was supernatural.
We just heard a rock clack right over here.